everyone's searching for something, whether it's we post something on Instagram and hope we get 100 likes and then maybe we're happy enough, right?
Yeah.
It's almost like we're petitioning people to tell us who we are. You know, am I good enough? And we look to all these other things, all these other outlets, when in fact we need the Father to look at us and go, I see who you are. I see who you're made to be. I call that forth and I say it's good. It's very good. It's beautiful. Who you are is amazing and I'm proud of you. I think everyone's searching for those affirmations.
Absolutely.
On November 29th, 1947, Jews all over the world held their breath.
I sat near Rav Batch. He had a list of the countries in front of him. He recorded the way each country voted.
The resolution of the Dutch Committee for Palestine was adopted by 33 votes, 13 against, 10 abstentions.
And when the partition resolution came into being on May 14th, 1948, 7 Arab armies invaded the new Jewish state, the nascent Jewish state, in an effort to prevent its emergence, and that effort was also rebuffed.
In the whole history of the world, no people, no country has ever gone out of existence for anything like 2,000 years and then been reborn.
You're really used to Israel being a nation, so it's like, well, I mean, they've always been a nation as far as I can remember.
Thanks, David. Yes, we are live here in Jerusalem, marking the anniversary of the war which changed the course of the Middle East. 40 years later, the region is as divided as ever, though.
But the reestablishing of Israel as a nation is such a dramatic, radical, stunning, convincing sign.
On the 5th of June 1967, Israel launched an all-out war on its Arab neighbors. In just 6 days, Israel defeated 3 Arab armies and tripled its land area.
It was impossible to happen, historically speaking. It's never happened before, anything like it in human history, that a nation would be out of its homeland for even more than 40 years, one generation, and still return back to that land with its language. And it was about 2,000 years.
The newly formed state could not be destroyed. For Arab countries, the shock and scale of the sudden defeat came as a huge blow.
Israel found itself outnumbered and outgunned on 3 fronts: Egypt to the south, Jordan to the east, and Syria to the north. The Soviet Union had poured $2 billion worth of arms into the Arab nations. Israel's enemies brought twice as many soldiers, 3 times as many tanks, and 4 times as many airplanes to the battlefield. But just before the war, Egypt, Israel's main enemy, suffered a series of major mistakes and mishaps.
The Six-Day War is considered one of the most decisive military operations in history.
On the morning of June 5th, Jordanian radar detected the Israeli Air Force taking off. They sent a red alert to Cairo, but the decoding officer used the wrong day's code and failed to decipher the vital information. The warning never came.
In the Middle East that began on June 6, 1967, I don't think you can find another event, certainly not in the modern history of this region, which has been so limited in its time frame and so circumscribed geographically, which has had such profound regional and indeed international ramifications.
To some, the confusion in the Egyptian command just before the war evoked memories of the biblical story of Gideon routing the enemies of Israel. Instead of annihilation, Israel won one of the most decisive victories in military history.
As the area is secured, Parisians, many now accustomed to these emergencies, ordered to keep their...
Police and troops are on alert all over France after another act of terror in Paris. A gunman who was allegedly known as a threat to police.
A Parisian landmark turned into a crime scene. The Champs-Élysées is one of the busiest parts of town.
What can you say? It just never ends.
Just 2 days ago, 2 men were arrested in Marseille, France, suspected of planning an attack to disrupt the election.
The showdown with North Korea. The rogue state is turning up the temperature yet again.
The young leader of an impoverished nation has an appetite for grandiose propaganda.
South Korea has come so far, is so dramatically stronger, better, more prosperous, freer. You'd hate to see anything happen that would disrupt that development. So I think this is a very serious time.
Venezuela is at a breaking point. Thousands taking to the streets yet again today after weeks of violent protests in the capital city of Caracas.
A cloud of uncertainty hangs over the future of the South American country.
There were other 5 victims. So again, it seems like not only is the sort of tension escalating.
The world, it seems, is quickly moving toward a point of no return.
Some of the worst fighting to grip Libya has played out in recent months as seesaw battles rage between rival militia and the military.
Now, some of these trends have existed throughout church history, but in the end times, they have a distinct intensity. That's the point. They make global headlines in a way they never did before. They constitute a sign, meaning some theologians look at these and they go, well, they've always been there. There's no sign in just the general trends of history. This is talking about a heightened level that's distinct.
Madam President, today a perfect storm has engulfed the Middle East and continues to threaten international peace and security. Millions have been displaced in the biggest refugee crisis since the Second World War. In many countries, societies have fractured along ethnic or religious lines.
Men and women, it seems like every day there is something in the news that reminds us of the perilous times in which we live.
The American flag is under attack on a college campus yet again, this time at UC Davis, where its student senate voted to remove the flag from its meetings.
Cabot Phillips, what the heck is going on?
We've got patriotism triggering people now. And look, this may be shocking to many of our viewers at home, but for anyone that has stepped foot on a college campus in the past few years, they know this is the environment we have now where students are coddled and almost encouraged to be offended by everything, in this case, the American flag.
Verse 10, he goes, it's going to go beyond that. Hatred towards one another, believer, unrelated to faith. Hatred in the culture is going to be common at a level beyond what it is now. We can see it increasing. Never in my 40 years of ministry have I seen the social context in which people are so easily offended. And so, so sensitive and preoccupied with their honor and how they're treated and all these things. Just powder kegs are just everywhere. Just a phrase will set off a riot in a university or a city or a college or a nation, because there's this incredible shift of the emotional climate in society. It's going to get far more intense.
But critics fear this is becoming an anti-American trend among universities.
And look, this isn't isolated. If this was one isolated incident, you could chalk it up to a few crazy college students. But we reported across the country at Leadership Institute's Campus Reform on all this craziness.
In what world do people think it's okay for teachers to discuss transgenderism with a bunch of 5-year-olds? Maybe, just maybe, they ought to stick to teaching the kids how to read and write instead of deconstructing their God-given gender identity. And whatever happened to reading an old-fashioned nursery rhyme? You know, back when I was in school, Jack and Jill went up the hill, but today, when Jack came down, he was wearing Jill's dress and going by the name Jackie.
Well, they are calling it the worst thing any contestant has ever done in 34 seasons of their reality show Survivor. Fans around the world are outraged over the tactics of contestant Jeff Varner during a tribal council when he outed fellow contestant Zeke Smith as transgender.
Deception is dressed up in a happy countenance and positive messaging. The presentation of deception is very, very positive most times. I mean, there's a few exceptions. Deception is the most dangerous of all of the negative trends because we're unaware of it. It's right next to us, and it's positive, and it's happy, and it's affirming, and yes, it feels good. Boom, we gotcha. That's what the enemy would say.
Thanks for having me.
This is one of the most profound changes, I think, in the history of the West, the redefinition of sex from a biological reality to a social construct, and it's had a lot of implications.
But starting at the end of the month, some women's, men's, and even gender-neutral restrooms at UW-Madison will have free tampons. And the students I talked to tonight didn't even flinch when I asked them about putting these in men's restrooms.
Is the idea that sex is purely a social construct and not a biological reality, is that rooted in science?
No, this is what was really stunning to me, was to see how, we have science thrown in our faces all day long. And your sex is literally established from the moment of conception. That is a very basic biological medical reality. And if you read, say, medical textbooks, they're going to talk about your sex in very plain scientific terms. And society is going in a completely different direction.
There's a passage that's been on my heart the last couple of months. It's 2 Timothy 3, and talking about this world that we live in right now. But it's an interesting passage because he starts off, Paul tells Timothy, understand this.
But it'll start, know this. Paul said, this is need to know information. This isn't just kind of like casual information.
And then he says this in verse 2, for people will be lovers of self.
It's not for nothing that Webster's officially added the word selfie to the dictionary this year.
Why? Perhaps because narcissism has become completely intertwined with the fabric of our society.
Oxford estimates use of the word in the past year has increased 17,000%.
The crazy thing about this list is many of these things we read, and nowadays we just kind of shrug our shoulders at it.
The current version of the DSM defines narcissism as intense self-absorption and a grandiose sense of self. Sounds familiar.
Because the emotional dynamics of billions of people is going to shift to an increase of evil and selfishness. So he's talking about the emotional dynamics of the planet.
I grew up in something often called Generation Me, but when I look at the current world, I can't remember why that fit us. This is Generation Me, or maybe Generation Look at Me.
And it's become so normal to us. I mean, I was reading this thing about the sociologists are saying that our culture, this generation, is by far, by a long shot, the most narcissistic culture to ever exist.
It seems that has become part of the zeitgeist. The idea that everyone deserves a camera crew or a microphone to broadcast everything about them.
Everyone thinking, I have the opinion that's going to change. We think that's normal.
We have Twitter, Facebook, MySpace, Foursquare, and myriad blogging tools that are built to allow us to tell the world everything we're thinking, as if every thought we have should be shared.
You understand, back then they'd be like, you gotta be kidding me. Everyone is gonna think that their voice should be heard, and everyone is gonna build this shrine to themselves so that everyone else can see and make themselves look as good as possible. It's normal.
That's what Paul is describing here.
What do you want to believe? What's your pleasure? What would you like? I'll find you a teacher to give you that. But Paul tells Timothy, don't you be one of those guys. You know what this book says. You preach it. You lay it out there. Now's the time to stay the course. Now this time is to stay strong, because the time's coming. People are going to be lovers of themselves, lovers of pleasure, not lovers of God.
How about this? I go over there, punch him in the head, and come right back.
Carrie, no!
Like Tom Cruise and other celebrity Scientologists, Remini vocally supported the church, to a religion that demanded much of your time, your money, and your mind.
It is our responsibility to be Scientologists, no matter where we live or work, no matter our resources or excuses.
Well, what you would be told is that you're working to be your better self in all areas of your life.
So, clearly, the global in-tray is very disruptive. It is creating uncertainty. It is also signaling a degree of complexity that in some ways is unprecedented. And if you just take the most brutal news item of the last week, that we have the United Nations declaring 4 concurrent droughts. First of all, there hasn't been one declared in over 20 years, and now we have 4 concurrent droughts.
You know, the world's getting crazy. Who knows what's going to happen next? You just see it happening. The writing's on the wall. Every month seems like just something new.
In the midst of a world that was actually beginning to lose a sense of collective interest, why is it that nations agreed for the first time on a shared agenda for development? This has never existed before.
The resolutions on sustaining peace and the 2030 agenda are calls for hope.
Put them with all the political signs that we haven't looked at, all the other globalization signs, you put them all together and say, what hour of history are we living at?
Just point him out and describe an article of clothing that he's wearing.
Purple shirt, I guess. Lavender.
You have the record may reflect.
And it's mostly good news for former New England Patriots receiver Aaron Hernandez.
This morning, questions surrounding the death of former NFL superstar Aaron Hernandez.
Hernandez is back.
Something's not right. Something doesn't add up.
Hernandez was found dead in his prison cell yesterday with the Bible verse from John 3:16 written on his forehead.
That's among the most quoted Bible verses.
Just after 3 Wednesday morning, hanging from a bedsheet tied to a window.
Hernandez also appeared to have red marker on his hands and feet.
Not the Aaron that I know. He was not on suicide watch, having shown no hint of depression.
This is odd for him to break down. I've never seen this in him. And particularly, it was a positive verdict for him. Or something had happened that he couldn't control anymore.
As we've reported, before he took his life, he wrote letters to his family and lawyers and made several drawings in blood on one wall of his cell. Sources tell us there was a large drawing of the all-seeing eye of God on top of what's known as the unfinished pyramid. Under the symbol was the word Illuminati in all caps. And on that same wall, he wrote John 3:16, and a Bible nearby was open to that verse.
That Bible verse says in part, whoever believes in Jesus shall not perish but have everlasting life.
Hernandez also wrote that he would see them in heaven and he was entering into the timeless realm.
Me and my baby's on our honeymoon.
Online, his Facebook was filled with posts.
A Facebook video shows a happy time between a husband and wife on their honeymoon.
Henderson walked into Smith's classroom with a handgun and began shooting, striking her and 2 students.
Reloaded and started shooting again, then killed himself.
County deputy is recovering after being shot in the line of duty by a man investigators say had just murdered a woman. That man is now behind bars after some bizarre behavior and an unusual turn of events.
Kim, that man showed up at the police station with blood on his hands, saying he was Jesus, his dad was God, and he had to chop a woman's head off with an axe. When police questioned him, he started ranting about being Jesus, telling officers his dad was God and that he fought with Satan.
Venha a nós o vosso reino. Seja feita. Assim na terra como no céu. E com o nosso cada dia nos dai hoje. Perdoa as nossas ofensas, assim como nós perdoamos os nossos pecadores. Não nos deixei cair em tentação, mas livrai do mal. Amém. Você não é poderoso. Você não é poderoso. Jesus, Deus está aqui. Deus é maior do que tudo. Você não é poderoso. Deus é maior. Jesus Cristo está aqui.
Conheço a Bíblia melhor do que você. Você não sei quanto é você bom. Eu tô na cozinha, eu tô te aguardando. Levante.
Você é do mal.
Cidade.
Você não é.
Você
é. Sai.
Isso. Isso!
Sai!
Qual o santo que tá aí? Qual o santo que tá aí? Fala aí!
Lúcifer!
Lúcifer!
Someone called 911 to report a man acting crazy at a Valero gas station.
Police brutality! I am God! I am God! In the name of the Lord Jesus Christ.
ירד מהפסים. תקשיב טוב, אתה דופק אותי.
תעצור או שאני אדרע לך טייזר! תעצור! תעצור או שאני יורד! רק את מה שיש לך ביד!
תוריד את... תוריד את הבזנ"ט!
תוריד את זה! תוריד את הבזנ"ט!
תראו שופט פה.
דרופ! דרופ!
תקלו הצידה של העין.
תיזהר שם! דרופ! תחזרו משם! תחזרו משם!
חכה רגע, תן לו להוריד את זה.
דרופ! דרופ!
חכה,
מישהו את הפנים עם הבזנ"ט, חבר'ה.
חכו.
דוד, זה רחוק?
קרב ותן לו.
דרופ איתו, שוט!
תן לו, יופי, יאללה.
That's right, David. That man, police say, believed he was Jesus Christ. After crashing into that home on Blackstone Road, he stripped off all his clothes.
Police were called to this Goodwill store in Muncie Saturday after a man began yelling, trying to get people to convert to Islam, even calling himself God.
He just
turned violent really quickly and grabbed her by the throat, and the police officer tased him, which didn't faze him a bit.
Lisa, they said it was unlike anything they've ever seen before. 41-year-old Kenneth Crowder ran around naked through this Melbourne neighborhood saying that he was God.
But for some, the city's holiness causes psychological distress.
It might sound surprising, but the city's hospitals are also getting ready. Every year, Israel experiences dozens of cases of Jerusalem syndrome.
Jerusalem syndrome, to be exact. What is this syndrome that afflicts dozens of tourists every year? Here to discuss with me today is Dr. Moshe Kalyan, the district psychologist of Jerusalem.
First of all, Jerusalem syndrome is not a
disease.
A disease. It's not a medical entity. It's more, we could call it a phenomenon.
So these people, when you're sitting with them and you're speaking with them, what are they telling you? They really truly believe that they came for
yes, they're,
a mission in Jerusalem to save Jerusalem, or like
to save humanity,
to save humanity,
the whole world.
Like Jesus Christ.
Some of them believe that they're the new Jesus, or they represent the second coming of Jesus, or there was once a woman who thought that she's going to give birth to the new baby Jesus, and that's why she came to Jerusalem. They sometimes hear voices or have these ideas that they have a special mission given to them by God.
The only issue is that the sense of breathtaking excitement has a strange tendency to lead to psychotic outbursts, where tourists suffer delusions that they're figures from the Bible or harbingers of the end of days. Or the Austrian man who flew into a rage when his hotel's kitchen staff refused to prepare the Last Supper for him.
Because those tourists who come to Jerusalem and act like biblical figures, they see Jerusalem as a stage or a theater stage.
The real. But you got to do that every morning to know who you really are and not be jaded, you know, with this crazy world, because it will taint you. So you do that every morning, you'll be humble.
We gon' be alright. Rapper Kendrick Lamar leads the field with 11.
I respect Kendrick so much as an artist. You know, first of all, I love the incorporation of jazz and funk into his music and not shying away from it just because it's not, you know, mainstream.
If you could pick 3 artists to collaborate with, deceased or living, who would they be? That's easy. Tupac, of course.
It was a moment that changed the landscape of music forever.
I see no changes. Wake up in the morning.
You realize how much of an influence he really did have, and that how big of a deal it was. I guess I realize it more now than I did 20 years ago.
It's just for real, you know what I'm saying? And we run out of the bubble, you know? So
where's the music going? Is it gonna get harder?
I don't know, it depends on the balls, you know. And it's got big nuts like me, it's gonna get way harder. It's got little nuts, it's gonna start getting back to a different type of rap, you know what I'm saying? Partying and all of that type, because that's what we talk about when they don't let us talk about what we really want to talk about. So it depends, you can listen to the rap.
Pac was a prophet to me, and everything he's talking about is actually going on today. You know what I'm saying? So if what I'm putting in my music is an act of God and he using me as a vessel, what makes me any different from somebody being in church and giving their word?
A line as far as the eye can see as thousands waited in line at a Compton Best Buy today to meet famous rapper Kendrick Lamar.
Kendrick Lamar was born and raised in Compton. He's known, as his success has grown, to give back to his community.
Now, there's been a lot of mixed reviews behind the album. Some people feel like you're being too preachy.
Preachy.
How do you feel about the reception of the album?
I feel great about the reception.
There's also parts in the album where you speak to Lucy, Lucifer, the devil. So you
it's trippy.
You see both sides of.
Yeah, man. It's when I go inside, I may do an after party. I see it all around, man. I may do an after party, and this is how I'll be able to write these records, because it's not just the positive energy that speaks to me. It's the negative too. It's the evils too, and we all have temptations.
Right.
He says what's most impressive about Chance is that he's been able to achieve success without the backing of a major label. And he won not once, but 3 times last night, beating out records by Drake and Kanye West. The Jones College Prep grad credits his higher power for his tremendous success.
But unlike almost every other artist out there, Chance works for himself.
I know people think that independence means you do it by yourself, but independence means freedom. I do it with these folks right here. Glory be to God. I claim the victory in the name of the Lord. Let's go!
That went on to earn Chance 3 Grammys.
Once again, I want to thank God.
Me, I'm just fortunate enough to translate them temptations through record.
Right.
You know, I always said that this is truly a gift for me. Putting these records out is a gift for me, because I'm not only a voice for myself, but I'm a voice for people who can't express themselves like that.
Right.
And Lucy is one of my favorite records because it's me actually coming to realization of the evils rather than acting like it's not going around. My faults are not happening. My faults are happening right in front of my face. I gotta present them.
It's really interesting now in with what's going on in hip hop. You seem, it's almost like you're a throwback to when lyrics mattered, because it feels like so much of hip hop today is more about vibe and swag and personality and less about words. And it sometimes sounds like even the MC doesn't know what he's saying on today's record.
Right.
So it's interesting to hear the sort of clarity and depth that you go lyrically. I know some artists get lost in touring, and they become less relatable. Like the stuff they have to write about doesn't relate because all they know is being on stage and accolades and hotels and like stuff that's like their reality is so different than everybody else's reality that it's not so interesting.
Definitely.
Especially if that's all you talk about.
Definitely. It's definitely a different, it's a like to call it a cartoon world, you know, and you can really get lost in it so fast, you know. It's scary out there. It's so scary, man. And
But it reminded me a little bit of Snoop. And Murder Was the Case. Where
Of
he
course.
had that conversation with the devil, with Lucifer, and that temptation was in his face. And of course, it seems like a metaphor for something, but so you see this temptation that
He is the greatest of all time. So Kendrick is just, he is the people's champ.
Many people in line drove miles to wait in a line that wrapped around the corner and seemed to just go on and on and on. Kendrick Lamar said he wouldn't stop signing until every person who waited got an autograph.
Everything has a contradiction. Everything is, you know, higher rankings, and he is way beyond us, way beyond people. So basically, do what you do good with your people, and live your life, because what's going on is not really in our hands. If not in the president's hands, then it's definitely not in yours. Take that. So come on. Yeah, when I say the president can't even control the world, then you know it's definitely something else that's out there, you know, that's really pushing the buttons, you know, so they can do whatever they want to do. We've been doing it for years. We all puppets. Just play your cards right. Stay true to the actual art, to the actual culture, to the actual creativity of it all. Everything else will follow behind that. That's the first thing you chase. Don't chase nothing else, because what happens is you start to become an artist by numbers, and you want to do that because you're going to be following each and every other person's steps, and those steps may not be your steps.
Have you noticed if you ever log into Twitter, as an example? So there's an extra delay that you don't know how long it's going to take. It's between 2 and 3 seconds, where the number of new notifications on Twitter you have. So why is that there? Well, it makes that into what's called a variable schedule reward. It's like a slot machine. So you're playing the slot machine, and there's a time delay, and in that time delay, your anticipation's building, and then you get to see how many notifications I get. And so you become more addicted to checking it again the next time.
Digital is reshaping the world, and this is going very, very fast.
Today, wherever we go, we're inevitably surrounded by fellow citizens staring into their phones, as we usually are too.
In the first 10 years of the 21st century, the world is experiencing an explosive growth of the internet age.
Now, day 2 of Facebook's F8 conference is underway in San Jose, California. Now, in day 2, the social media behemoth revealed it's working on building a brain-computer interface that will let you type with just your mind.
But if anybody can do 3 huge visionary future companies, I suppose it's Elon Musk. Look, he is great at making things that people don't think could ever happen.
And it sort of ties in with some of the things we heard out of F8 this week, Henry, right?
Right.
Questions of whether you can type with your mind.
Facebook is talking about its own moonshots, and this is a direct brain interface too. So obviously lots of folks out there are thinking about it. Facebook's example.
So as the AI scientists are building the tools, the machine learning tools, the world is starting to be filled with data. So quietly, these two things, along with the progress of computing, really started to converge in a way that most people didn't expect.
The problem is that there's so much data that has to be gathered and processed and sorted that there is not a computer system that's up to the task. And suddenly we find that we're entering into the age. Google now has launched what they call quantum computing.
Well, scientists in China say they have built the world's first machine that can compute many times faster than the current breed of supercomputers.
Machines that take those ones and zeros to a level of computing power that has never existed.
We heard the term game changer. How significant is this quantum computer development?
Towards a universal quantum computer. Very important milestone is that we're starting to emerge out of the research era to commercialization.
In real people terms, how would this impact your life and my daily life?
So that it does not simply take data and go through it and sort it, it looks at the entirety of the data and sorts it instantaneously.
Well, there's a saying, finding a needle in the haystack. That is a very difficult thing to do.
Let's try to simplify this a little bit. Imagine this room is a library, and we just take one book, and on just one page, we write an X.
But with quantum computing, now you can actually isolate down to a specific sand particle out of all the sand in the world.
That goes from just a few seconds to being instantaneous, faster than I can snap my fingers.
But what if it was looking for that one X on that one page, and it had to sort through every single book in the world? There are billions of them, and it would take a computer of today centuries. Probably would be impossible. But a quantum computer, that's where things change completely, because it goes through all of the books and all of the pages all at the same time and finds that X in seconds.
As well as powering the future generation artificial intelligence that in the future can be fully autonomous and can handle systems of systems, especially in the context of smart cities.
This has a huge ability to enable the Internet of Things to become functional on a daily basis.
Some brand new privacy problems thanks to technology, go figure. Something that you actually use every day could, again, be spying on your every move.
I have to say, Bose has not responded to this lawsuit yet, but the Connect app licensing agreement does say that it may collect your data. So that information is in there, but it does not specifically mention the collection of the audio files. So the devil really is in the details here.
And that's why we find even like people like Google are using it to sort your information.
The apps on your phone may be eavesdropping on you. A new article in Wired magazine claims that apps have increasingly incorporated ultrasonic tones to track consumers.
Matt and I then logged into the email of a friend who will keep anonymous, and all his whereabouts so far in 2017 popped right up in scary detail. Not only was Matt able to guess a few things about this friend, he guessed right.
I think the interesting thing here is that when you are listening to music, why do you listen to music through headphones? You think it's a private experience. Well, is it really that private now? We're not so sure anymore.
In fact, this is already here. This is already happening. Internet giants are all infusing artificial intelligence in all their products and services. Snapchat uses this to improve advertisement targeting. Apple and its GPS functions, all their products and services are now being enhanced by AI, and it already seems normal to us. It already seems normal because our brain perfectly adapts to our current environment. And in fact, it adapts so well that it makes us blind in terms of how fast this is going.
And to power this with a breakthrough innovation engine modeled after DARPA. Products that recognize we are both mind and body, that our world is both digital and physical.
You know that Google go even further. They want to make us live forever. They consider death as a disease, and they want to make us live forever. This is just the beginning.
What if you could type directly from your brain? It sounds impossible, but it's closer than you may realize. And it's just the kind of fluid human-computer interface needed for AR.
Every day, there is news coverage on the latest advances in AI.
Understanding semantics means that one day you may be able to choose to share your thoughts independent of language.
How would you characterize the level of concern the public should have with respect to their privacy?
DEFCON 5, that I think that we have very little privacy left.
And I think that the sooner the people accept the fact that basically there's no privacy going forward, the safer the society will become. The sooner you realize that whatever you write in your email can be read by motivated others, the sooner that we all realize that being an atheist or being liberal or conservative is something that basically people will know about. Well, they could probably very easily infer it now and definitely would just get easier in the future.
But where we are going today is and I think the place where we're going to feel the greatest and most immediate impact is with money itself.
America stands at a tipping point when it comes to giving up cash.
A new study that shows Europe and the United States are getting closer than ever to going cashless.
And while new technologies like contactless and mobile payments are slowly on the rise in the US, some economists think that we could see cashless societies emerge in this century. But for now, it seems Americans aren't quite ready to give up their cash.
When we think about the ubiquitous nature of credit cards and debit cards and other banking forms, in fact, it has grown so much that last year, Wells Fargo closed 84 branches. This year, they're going to close 200 bank branches.
Hundreds of Wells Fargo branches are on the chopping block tonight.
Wells Fargo announces plans to shut down more than 400 bank branches by the end of 2018. The company says the acceleration of closures comes as Americans seem to prefer online and mobile banking.
An unmanned convenience store where customers can purchase items without cash or card has opened in Korea.
Time to move on to our Focus report, which takes us to India this Friday.
This is the first unmanned biometrically accessible convenience store in Korea.
Fingerprints and iris scans, and over 1 billion Indians have now received their cards.
Aadhaar aims to provide an identification number to each of India's 1.3 billion people. It also records every individual's fingerprints and iris scans for the government's massive database.
The world we are in is becoming more and more digital. We need new means to ensure this world is safe. Biometrics are key to that new digital world.
The
biometric recognition market utilizing fingerprints, veins, irises, and facial features is evolving rapidly. Your face is your access card at this security firm.
And then there's the whole issue of biometrics, which has such promise to it.
Okay, now put the fingers of your right hand.
This is a revolution.
I want to enroll my 3-year-old daughter in school. They told me I can't do it without my Aadhaar card, so I desperately need it.
The government has now made Aadhaar mandatory for availing subsidies on food and fuel, for opening bank accounts, and for getting a mobile phone connection.
And it's something that only today is possible. In other words, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, we looked at these prophecies. 20 years ago, we looked at these prophecies and said, well, this could happen, that could happen, but we don't really know how it would be possible for the entire world to be tied into this economic system.
And I think that everyone here, especially the class of 2016, understands that viscerally, internally, intellectually. You're about to graduate into a complex and borderless world.
The reality is we have been in a one-world economy for a very, very long time. That we are borderless on so many levels already.
If you look at the last 100 years in particular, and certainly into the future, as we'll do with some of these maps, you will see an incredible and astounding volume of connectivity that is being built, that is being laid down. I actually liken all of this infrastructure, if you animate it over a 100-year time frame, it is like a skeleton that we as humankind are building on the physical surface of the planet Earth. That is called topographical engineering. And that is what we as a human civilization now have the engineering capability to do. That the nature of geography is changing. It's becoming much more complex.
Average speed of transportation is accelerating. People are traveling more than ever.
If you're a conservative Christian family, you want to sit down at 8 o'clock on any given weekday night and watch a show, you can't do it. There's nothing for you. There's nothing that appeals to you. And it seems like a lot of times these networks, they put shows out there that intentionally alienate a large portion of their audience, and they must know that they're not going to reap a lot of benefits from that. They're not going to get ratings, but they do it anyway because they care more about the agenda. They care more about undermining the family than they.
My big question is why? What are some of the reasons that might explain this drop among millennials?
And you had some journalists that responded to that. One girl, Jennifer, she tweets,
Jennifer Rubin.
Either he was hacked or he's totally lost it.
Washington Post.
Well, yeah, those words were written 2,000 years ago, so I doubt very much that they knew this was going to be going on today or yesterday when they were written.
A lot of what's happening, Jeff, is what we call generational replacement. It's a nice way of saying that the older generations, which were very heavily Christian, are passing away, and they're being replaced by younger cohorts that are far more unaffiliated.
Well, I think it is important to put this in the broader cultural context. And what we found over a bunch of studies is that the American culture has become more individualistic. So an individualistic culture places more emphasis on the self and less on social rules.
Yeah, it's surprising to see the statistics lay it out so clearly.
That's why the fall, again, 68% is a large number, but that drop is something to notice.
Yeah, it certainly is. Cal Doherty from Pew Research Center, appreciate your time tonight.
But what's really interesting is that the overwhelming majority of us nuns aren't necessarily atheists. 2/3 believe in God or a universal spirit.
It's when politics becomes such a part of television programming that the other side is not allowed that I get nervous. And the question is, did that happen to Tim Allen? So he's, of course, the famous actor. He's been around a long time. He had a show called Last Man Standing. And it did well, apparently. It portrayed positively a character who was a conservative Christian.
That ABC, it basically says they can't afford the cost of the cast. What do you say to that?
Well, it's hard for me to buy that because they just gave raises to all 6 of the cast members on Modern Family, which is a very gay-friendly show. The kind of show that ABC is always trying to push on their audience. And so while they give raises to all 6 of the cast members, they can't afford Tim Allen's salary. Although the show is their #2 comedy, their #3 scripted show on the entire network, anchors their Friday nights. It's done well in the ratings. By the way, I'm not trying to be a snowflake and cry because a TV show is canceled like some kind of college student, but it is sort of interesting to see that Hollywood hates conservatives so much that they're willing even to sacrifice money just to make sure that they're not appealing to an audience that they really feel to be basically subhuman, it seems.
It may be the most amazing thing most people never heard of.
I'd go to PTA meetings for my son's school, or I'd have my neighbor over for dinner, and I realized, wow, people outside of my little science world have no idea what's going on, and yet this is going to impact everybody's lives.
And I worked on Capitol Hill, started in 1968. And in those days, the Democrats and Republicans got along real well. And although they would fight on the floor, after they left the house, they would go have a drink together. Today, it's just, it's not happening today.
When did we get so soft? Like when did we as Australians become so soft that we couldn't cop somebody else's opinion and get on with our lives anyway if we didn't agree with it? We've gone so soft and we're so judgmental and we want to ban everything that we don't agree with as people, which is robbing us of our personality.
Today's shooting is calling into question the state of American politics. Is it too hateful?
But just be kind. I think be kind. I'm sick of people being cruel and nasty online.
That's right. And
It's
also,
horrific.
that's
So
right.
back off, everyone.
Free speech does not mean the right to abuse people or threaten them or incite violence against them. That is reprehensible. That is not what we're talking about.
When we get to the point where we can't talk to each other without going to blows, we have lost all the fabric of our society is in danger.
We can't say we didn't tell you about this one. Guys, another one for you. First, as you know, the world went wild when the male romper, or the romp him, hit the fashion scene. Orders went through the roof. Well, today we present this ensemble, designed by LA-based brand Hologram. Social media is all googly-eyed over this. Can't be sure if those pieces are machine washable, but I checked, and some of the color and combo sizes are already sold out. So if you like what you saw,
as early as next week, you won't need to pick a gender to apply for a Washington, D.C. driver's license. The state following in Oregon's footsteps. We actually told you about that last week.
And just that thing again, just going back to your original article, just because we disagree with something, should it be banned? Is our world really coming to a place of safe spaces? Isn't that what the Nazis did? They burned books because they didn't like what was written inside them.
Exactly right.
So are we going to support fascist behaviour now? Is that what we're going to do in a bid to be PC?
I think that is exactly what's happening now.
So I have to ask you, speaking of countries divided by language and religion, about Canada, the country we lived for a while. There is a new law in Canada that apparently will criminalize the misuse of pronouns. You could go to jail for calling someone by a pronoun he, she, or whatever doesn't prefer. Am I misreading this law? Does it actually suggest that that could happen?
Yes, they've added gender identity to the Canadian Human Rights Act. And that actually is the case. For Canadians, now misgendering someone will risk you being embroiled either at a Human Rights Commission or in a criminal court. I mean, it's absolutely extraordinary, this. What we're witnessing is an Orwellian assault on the most fundamental language, the language which defines the two sexes. And Canada has just put itself on the side of criminalizing that.
Wait, a fundamental language that corresponds with fundamental biology, all of which it is now mandatory to deny. It's you sort of wonder, like, why does no one stand up and say that?
You've taught only in Sweden, right? So what has been changing and what has changed in the last 10 years?
I started to observe things about 15 years ago, I think. I started to feel that the corridor, of opinions were
getting narrower.
Yeah, and it was quite obvious in school. You change focus in school. You were not supposed to teach the students anymore. You were supposed to make good citizens of them, to have the right values, the right opinions, and that was kind of a political propaganda. I didn't realize that first. I was just wondering what is happening. Why can't we say what we want anymore? There was I called it everyone should agree and think exactly the same.
And what really worries me about the current standard of debate at the moment is that seems to be the knee-jerk reaction of a lot of people who call themselves progressives. That if something is controversial or provocative or says something they don't like, it should be banned, it should be shut down. And that's what's happened with this film.
When the Seattle Storm take the court against Chicago July 18th, the team will make a statement beyond basketball.
It's definitely a first for us, and it's first for a professional sports team.
Storm co-owner Don Trudeau told me the WNBA team will donate some ticket revenue that night to Planned Parenthood.
We must also use this opportunity to do more to protect our unborn children.
It's almost a daily event in Europe, a terror attack of some sort, but not here.
But why not here on sort of the frequency, the level of violence that we're seeing?
There's always been violence in American politics.
Dr. Josh Stockley says this is about more than nasty politics.
I don't think it's the politics that's getting nastier from a civic standpoint. I think we as a nation are getting more violent.
What we are experiencing in America at this time is sin, lawlessness.
You say, we're headed in the wrong direction, aren't we, Phil? America's problem is that America doesn't know what its problem is.
And sometimes we wander off and we get lost and we swim with the current and we become routine to the darkness and we just get blinded instead of stopping for a second, looking up and saying, oh wow, that could be something cool.
You're looking at a woman who may have helped change the rules of life on Earth. Her name is Jennifer Doudna, and she would probably wince at the hyperbole, but it isn't far off.
Don't mess with the God of creation. You're going to lose.
How about the invention of a tool that can edit the genetic fate of almost anything alive? It may be the most amazing thing most people never heard of.
It's called CRISPR.
It's sort of making precise changes to the code of life, kind of analogous to changing the text of a document.
which we get.
Which we get, right? You see a typo in a document, you can go in and make that change. You know, it means that we can control human evolution now. We can control essentially anything that is alive. We can manipulate the script.
So I looked up this study on growing leaders, and I said, what is the #1 fear that college kids have today? And I like this study because it went past the normal fears that you would think of. See, what it said was, they're not happy with the direction that the country is going, and they are fearful to go into that. And they want to possess values, but life has always been very convenient for them, with little need to sacrifice for what is right. Interesting. When I read that, at first I was like, wow, that's awesome that that's such a, big fear. But then I thought, that's actually really bothers me, because this is something that we so have an opportunity to change.
Being gender neutral is a kind of norm, the new norm in Sweden, but no one really wants it. So that is a kind of destabilization of the Swedish society. In Sweden we are indoctrinating them to behave as women and even dress like women and wear cosmetica and take away all the male attributes.
The title of your book, The Strange Death of Europe. What do you mean by that?
I mean that through a whole set of things, Europe seems to me to be committing suicide, civilizational suicide. The book focuses on what happened in 2015 with the migrant crisis, you'll remember, but that crisis is still going on. It's been going on for a very long time. It preceded that year and it will go on for a long time to come. It's about a continent that decides to basically say, our home is the home for the entire world. It's the home for anyone who wants to come here. And in the process, as I say in the book, the peoples of Europe lose the only home we have. There's a whole set of other things, of course, civilizational self-doubt, guilt, all the things which you in America also now are getting.
Right, so they think they're being nice, they're being accepting and open, but really they're committing suicide, you say.
But in a practical sense, that's not happening anytime soon.
Yet, the headlines keep coming. Researchers in China and Sweden and the UK are already working with human embryos.
Yeah, it's passed on to future generations. That's what's so powerful.
So you actually do change evolution.
You change evolution. That's right.
It was when my dad took me hunting for the first time, and I started looking around, and I said, you know what? Something designed the design that I'm looking at. Are you kidding me? Look at all the details of creation.
Every cell of your body has 3 billion letters of the DNA code.
It has that many? 3 billion?
That's the number of letters that would be in a stack of 1,000 Bibles. And what CRISPR can do, it can go in and can find that one mistake and it can fix it.
Well, what is DNA? It is a molecule that sends information that every organism needs to grow correctly. It is the most complex code on the planet.
And she worries, what's next? Designer human babies, taller, smarter, better vision for a price.
I had a conversation the other day with someone who said they were imagining to go into an in vitro fertilization clinic of the future, and you're handed a menu and you check off, well, I want this, I want that, I want this, I don't want that, It's a bit creepy.
I'm not very smart, but if you have information, I'm pretty sure there was an informant. If you have a design, there's a designer. If you have a creation, you have a creator.
So she travels everywhere to tell the story about the amazing discovery she helped bring into the world.
You see what happens when you forget God and what He says? When you take it upon yourself to play God?
More than ever before, our privacy is a huge concern.
Somebody's watching you all the time, and it's a little scary.
Anyone downloading Snapchat's new Snap Maps option can be tracked. The new Snap Map shows your exact location in real time.
No clue. All kinds of new features go into those updates that you're not aware of unless you're really researching everything.
Saying that this is dangerous, where will the line for privacy be drawn?
This day and age, sadly to say, we have to watch our backs a little bit more often, so the feeling that someone might know where you are that you didn't want to know, it can be alarming.
That's not something that I would want on my phone.
We're bringing the physical world into the virtual world with these types of features.
What is this world really about that we are creating? What is the role for human beings in this world we're shaping? Is it just to make our lives easier?
In fact, this is a really important point that Aldous Huxley made in his classic dystopian novel, Brave New World. Huxley basically argued a similar point. He argued that Orwell was wrong and that, in fact, people would lose their freedom because they were so entertained by screens, by entertainment, by pop culture, that they would voluntarily give up a lot of their personal information.
One thing that I want to start with is that our children are very unique generations. So they're first generation who are born and raised in this hyper-connected internet world.
The telephone took 75 long years to acquire 50 million users. The internet, 4 years. Facebook, 2.5 years. WhatsApp, 15 months, and Angry Birds, 15 days. Yes? You better believe it.
Pricing is going futuristic. Some companies are using computer-driven artificial intelligence.
Going from a world where people used to stamp the price on the product itself to a world where you're buying goods and services online or even offline, but a pricing algorithm now determines it.
Because AI, in my opinion, is really about to blossom and explode. We could liken it maybe to the going back to when electricity came about. It changed not just the fact that we could turn a light on, but it really changed everybody's lives across the globe. That same possibility can happen here with AI. Very powerful.
So it's really one of the broadest theses or technologies that we've seen in a long time, and a lot of things have had to come together to make that possible.
And what's next?
Sorry, Matt, we're running out of time, so I hate to jump in. Do we need to fear it? Mark Andreessen said, hey, don't worry about autonomous cars. Kind of laughed it off. We've always been worried about job loss due to technology. It's never happened. It never will. But is this time different because machines are thinking, not just doing?
You know, you never know what's going to happen in transitions like this.
It's about unlimited access and power. In fact, one of the quotes that I found interesting is, if you want to keep a secret, you must also hide it from yourself. I mean, think about it. These companies know you better than you know yourself, and they also understand how to manipulate that knowledge.
So the first category is doing. I've learned when you talk at a, this is Texas Tech, right? I mean, so they only take you seriously at technical places if you have a laser pointer. So I got myself a laser pointer, and I will use it quite superfluously.
AI, as robots move from just mechanical devices to devices that can really simulate human behavior, but it's so much broader than that.
Humanity itself will be changed with this superintelligence, and we are at the doorstep of that era.
The other way to look at it, of course, is that this time around it is about our minds and our brains, and there's something more mystical going on and so forth.
2 airlines are testing new technology that could change airport security in the future.
The new face of flying, and it's yours. At Logan Airport, some passengers no longer need a boarding pass. Instead, they can simply use their face.
Yeah, the government says it will make us a little safer.
Next, please.
It looks like science fiction. A machine that scans your face so you can board an airplane without showing any documentation.
Well, because I don't need to know everything about us.
It's just kind of weird. It's the same kind of feeling with location services on phones, how it's like they're always following you. It's kind of like the same thing.
Some airlines are quickly moving forward with a plan for facial recognition.
Yeah, pretty fast.
Some fear it's moving too fast.
Implementation of the use of biometrics need to be scrutinized very closely.
Now, this isn't about being a Luddite. This is about losing the kind of freedom that we obviously take for granted because, unlike the NSA and government agencies, that we're actually inviting these companies to spy on us.
So when you travel and you go to the airport and you go through customs, they take note of where you're traveling. It's on their computer systems. They know exactly. They're not supposed to give that information out to anybody.
No.
Clearly not. But what troubles me is something different. Troubles me is why. Why are they so interested in the travel plans of those particular individuals?
There are downsides and risks with every medium of communication, and television was no different, and radio was no different, and print was no different. It's just the speed and the scale and the ease of access and the affordability of the digital revolution that's making it seem like a quantum leap.
Getting to be close to 8 billion of us on this planet, and we do have a moral obligation to make sure that the technologies we put in place serve the interests of humanity as a whole.
What has changed is a constellation of so-called converging technologies and an ever-accelerating rate of technological change seem poised to give reality to what was once pure speculation. The world of cutting-edge technology is immensely appealing and seductive, on the one hand. If people don't understand how to think about what constitutes a good human life, then what will be left to them is this, right? Which again is immensely seductive.
The speed is mind-boggling. What I'm particularly concerned about it is how little the world is prepared for the fourth industrial revolution.
Technology disruption, the fourth industrial revolution. Boy, if only I had a penny every time I came across these buzz phrases. Whether you believe that this is a brand new, distinct industrial revolution, or you feel that it's a mere prolongation of the previous one, I think we can all agree here that this phenomenon is all about exponential speed.
At the same time, education which encourages the kind of moral reflection that I am calling for is increasingly becoming a rare commodity.
Education so far in the Arab world has been to stress creating clones of our students. Youth who are identical to each other, who say the same thing when they're asked a question, who answer the same way, who think exactly the same way. And this is part of our paternalistic culture, but part of the third and the second and the first industrial revolution. That the fourth revolution does not need that. It needs individuals. This is not what we are teaching.
So I think that the problem is that these two trends together, it's a vector that points in a very dangerous direction.
And it's not just in intelligence, it's in biotechnology. They now have these automated like avatar characters that are going to be counseling and providing therapy for elderly citizens, people going through surgeries, everything. There's a lot of technology that is turning towards avatars or robots to do things in replace of humans.
My own sense is that the AI technology is not falling from the skies. It is not being delivered in some holy water coming from some mountain. It is being built by us. It is being written by people like us, and therefore it is yet another one of our creations. And I think it is important to keep that in perspective. It is incredibly powerful.
The not so cynical answer to your question is that we are at this remarkable moment when some things that people might have dreamt about for a very long time now, we're actually beginning to piece together how it is that some of them might really be brought about by serious human efforts. In this regard, genetic engineering is just the thin edge of the wedge.
Fast forward to 2017 and we have 20 human trials. I was interested to read in the Washington Post earlier this month that a Gallup survey of public opinion found that the number of Americans that found human cloning was on a par with polygamy, growing upwards and upwards, so from a small base, entering the public consciousness.
What this kind of progress would really look like. But from the broader transhumanist perspective, it is certainly difficult to imagine that somehow in a world of perpetual change, there'll be a fixed moral core to preserve as the wildest of innovations are being developed.
And the desire to improve human health is the first one. And then aging. What are you going to do about making us live forever?
But those who advance transhumanist goals and expectations are adamant that they simply start from extrapolations of developments that are already in the works or on the horizon.